Once again, I want you to save the date. That is Saturday, November 9th, because that's the day that the CBD Health and Wellness Expo is happening at the Ventura County Fairgrounds in Ventura, California. Now they're going to have some free health screenings down there. And it's also going to be a great opportunity for you to talk to some of the CBD vendors. Kind of put them to the test. Find out exactly what their products are about and how they can help you. Again, that is Saturday, November 9th at the Ventura County Fairgrounds in Ventura, California. When you're there, stop by and say hello, because the My Grow Show will be there. Now, once again, I want to talk about CBDA, which is raw CBD. And it's considered raw because it still has that acid molecule attached to it. You see, a lot of times when commercial hemp is processed for the oil, it gets heated up. And that heat basically destroys that beneficial, delicate acid molecule. Now, when this happens, when that acid molecule evaporates off, it's called decarboxylation. And that's what you get with a lot of CBD that's on the market today. You get that decarboxylated CBD. Which is a shame because we're just starting to recognize and realize how much more beneficial that raw CBD is, that CBD when it still has that acid molecule attached to it. And that raw CBD is exactly what you get in every product from 101 CBD. And because that raw CBD is derived from hemp, that means that there's very little problem having it shipped worldwide. So go over to 101cbd.org, order yourself and your pet some CBD oil today. And at checkout, don't forget to use the coupon code IMGS25 to get 25% off of that order. Well, all right. Now let's get started. Brothers and sisters, hermanos y hermanas, welcome back. This is the In My Grow Show, the podcast dedicated to taking the mystery out of cannabis. I'm your host, Alex. I hope everyone's gardens are looking beautiful. All of my stuff right now, like it's a lot. It was only 3 little plants. But anyways, it's all chopped down, hanging up. Not a whole bunch of it, but whatever there is already down. Now later on, I am going to talk to Dr. Monica Vialpando, who came on to help me understand better the subject of what's going on in the vaping world. But that's a little later. So I did finally get my RSS feed figured out, and I got it all straightened out with Libsyn. So episode 80 from last week can now be heard on all of the podcast platforms, well, except for iTunes or whatever they use now. That's a whole long story, a whole other kind of conversation. I've talked about it before, not very interesting. Anyways, so yeah, got that straightened out, all figured out. So we're back up on all the platforms. I also got the second episode of the Spanish podcast called Mi Cultivo, which was all about the endocannabinoid system. It was just me by myself trying to explain basically the endocannabinoid system in Spanish as best I could. I have a feeling I left a lot of people with more questions than answers. But that's okay, because eventually I plan on having a doctor to come in and have that conversation with me again. I don't mind having it again. Actually, with a doctor would be a lot better. The reason I did it without a doctor is because I'm having trouble actually finding one to do it in Spanish. I know they're out there somewhere. I just don't know them. I don't know anybody who does know them. If you know them, send them my way. I'd like to talk to them. That's a lot of thems. Anyways, so yeah, got the second episode up in Spanish. If you need help explaining the endocannabinoid system to someone in your family in Spanish, go find that episode. That is episode number 2 of Mi Cultivo. And the title is El Sistema Endocannabinoide, which is the endocannabinoid system. So last week I went down to Sespe Creek Collective. That's a dispensary up here in Ojai. They had my buddy Dr. Eileen Gillan, whom I've had on the show before. She's a veterinarian. She was down there giving a presentation about cannabis and our pets. It was cool to see her and say hello. It was a really good conversation that she had. And here's the one thing I learned that night. So I know that if you get too high, I know for some of us that's not possible to be too high. Come on, is that really a thing? Too high? But, if someone, let's say, new to cannabis has way too much, either edibles or smoke too much, and got way too high, I know that, if you take some CBD, it helps dampen those effects of the THC. I'm not going to say that the CBD is going to make you sober, but it is going to make you feel less high, less anxious, less scared and nervous, I guess. I guess that all goes down with anxiety, right? Anyways, I know that happens with people. And my question was, can we do the same thing to our dogs if, let's say they get into our stash or they eat one of the edibles? Does it help dampen, lessen those effects so they're not as high? And she says that it does, that she's tried it on a couple of patients who came in that were showing just these symptoms of, gotten into somebody's stash, and that it actually worked on them. So there you go. Of course, always consult your own veterinarian. But if your dog does get into your stash and he's all wobbly and peeing on himself, give him a little CBD. Might help. And I did shoot video of the presentation. It's up on the website, either inmygrow.com, and it's also up on the YouTube channel, In My Grow. So if you want to see it, go over there and check it out, man. What else did I do this week? Oh, yes. Also, a couple of days ago, I went down to the insectary, Rincon-Vitova, because they're like 3 or 4 minutes away from my house. Totally awesome. I'm so lucky. So anyways, I went down there to pick up some like educational material, like pamphlets and some pictures, because I'm going to use that at the CBD expo. Because since I've got a booth, gonna have a table out there just to put out some information about how to have live biological predators in the garden, which ones to use. The only thing I am worried about is that a lot of the information that I'm picking up is like specific for marijuana, like, hey, these pests invade the marijuana plant, you want to use these other biological predators. And I know that the fairgrounds don't really want an association with marijuana. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to leave those pamphlets out there. It doesn't have a marijuana leaf on there anywhere. It doesn't, other than the word marijuana, that's all it is. I'm going to leave them out there. I'm going to see how that goes. It should be okay. If they make a stink about it, I'll take a magic marker and scribble out the word marijuana in the title. But we'll see how it goes. They shouldn't get uptight, right? It's only bugs. There's no marijuana anywhere in sight. Well, as a picture. I may be holding. Who knows? Anyways, I've gotten way too off topic. Coming back to Rincon-Vitova, I'm just really excited to have all my educational material from them. It's going to be really cool, man. Like I said, if you go, stop by, say hello. All right. Let's move on to the strain of the week. And I got to give it up. I got to say, first of all, thank you to a buddy of mine on the job site, a plumber. I'm not going to say who it is. I don't want to out the guy. Really nice guy. But he handed me this nugget of Death Star OG. Holy hell, that is a good fucking strain. And the Death Star OG is a cross between the Sour Diesel, the Sensi Star, and the OG Kush. Ooh my gosh. Did have a nice floral taste, like roses almost. And talk about having a heavy, euphoric, heady feeling. It got me really high for a long time and kept me there too. I know I was really high because I get super chatty when I'm that stoned. And yeah, I was a fucking chatterbox, man. But enjoyed the hell out of it. Now, the internet does say that it's slightly indica dominant. I didn't get that. I got a lot of energy from it. That might be the Sour Diesel doing its work. And plus, I didn't come crashing down the way I typically do with indicas. Because typically indicas, they'll get me really high and then they'll just kind of come down real hard like, hey, I need a nap. That didn't happen with this Death Star OG. And it could quite possibly make it into my top 10. And I'm still working on that top 10 list. Do you know why it's hard to put it together? Is because and you know what? God bless all the breeders. God bless all you pollen checkers out there. Everybody out there making new strains, thank you very much. Some of it's shit, a lot of it's fire. Either way, keep on doing it. Because there are more strains of cannabis than there are breeds of dogs. I love that. That's beautiful. Once again, thank you very much. But for that reason, that's why it's hard for me to put together that top 10 list. I know for sure it's going to be like the AKs on there. The Jack Hare, possibly this Death Star OG. I've got to go through my notes. I know I'm up to 6 or 7. Anyways, go find yourself some Death Star OG, pick yourself up some, and have a great time with it. All right, now what's going on in my social media? Something super local. I got a brochure the other day in the mail from my buddies over at Sespe Verde. They put together this brochure about all the legal cannabis activities that you can do in the 805, like if you're in Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo area. It's a pretty cool little thing, man. It's got a map on it. And I think they were telling me it's going up in some of the hotels. But I'm sure if you reach out to them on Instagram, that is at Sespe Verde, they can tell you where you can pick one up. Like I said, it's super local, mostly for the northern side of the 805. But I thought it was great, Good job to everybody over there at Sespe Verde. Now, something else that I put up on my social media page, my Instagram page this past week, I saw this headline, and it comes from Politico, and it was put together by Jacqueline Felcher. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And the title is, NASA Paid SpaceX for Safety Review After Musk Smoked Pot. So remember back a few months ago when Elon Musk went on Joe Rogan and he smoked a joint with them, and there was this huge, just big stink about it? Well, it stems from that. All right, it starts off, it says, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk's infamous pot-smoking incident last year prompted NASA to order a mandatory review of federal contractors' workplace culture, but taxpayers, not the companies, are bearing the cost, according to contract records. The space agency agreed to pay SpaceX $5 million in May to cover the cost of the review, which include educating their employees and ensuring they are following strict guidelines for federal contractors barring illegal drug use. So get that. NASA, because of Elon Musk smoking a joint, NASA said, hey, we need you guys to review like your drug policy, because even though it's legal in California, it's federally illegal and we are a federal agency. I mean, what was the idea there? That because the CEO was smoking pot, everybody was smoking pot? Maybe. I mean, I can see that, right? If the employees see the owner, they're like, well, fuck, if the owner's doing it, why can't I do it? I guess. I just think it's a funny thing. You know, I mean, there's more details to it than that. You know, there's this whole thing about how, you know, they asked Boeing to do it, but they made Boeing suck up the cost, whereas NASA paid SpaceX $5 million to do it, because SpaceX said, we're not doing it unless you pay us to do it. And there's a link in the show notes if you want to read the rest of this article, but I just thought that was pretty funny about NASA saying, hey, you pot smoker, we're not going to drug test anybody, but we're going to make sure you understand that you're not supposed to be smoking pot while you're a federal employee or while you're employed with SpaceX. I don't know how you word it. But anyways, go check it out. Let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at InMyGrow, or you can find me on Cannabis at just Alex Robles. All right, now let's move on to the report from the Cannabis Front Line. And we're going to start in Mexico, and I found this over at the Marijuana Moment. The headline reads, Mexican committee unveils marijuana legalization bill ahead of Supreme Court deadline. And once again, this was put together by Kyle Yeager. Starts off, several Mexican senator committees unveiled draft legislation late Thursday to legalize marijuana. I'm telling you, man, they're going to have it by the end of the year. Okay, I'm going to read some of the key provisions that are listed in this article. And it starts, adults 18 and older can possess cannabis for personal use, cultivate up to 4 plants, and purchase marijuana from licensed retailers. Wow, 18. Check that out. Well, hell, that's cool. You know, maybe that'll help Texas, get a legal cannabis program going. I doubt it, because Texas doesn't want to do anything that's very similar to Mexico. But who knows? You never know. Anyways, let's continue. Another thing is, an independent body called the Cannabis Institute would be charged with issuing licenses, setting up potency limits, and monitoring the implementation of laws, among other responsibilities. Okay, I wonder what kind of potency limits are they going to set, like on the plant themselves, on edibles and concentrates? I don't like that word, setting potency limits. Well, that set of words, not one word. But yeah, I'm highly suspicious of it. How's that going to work out? They're going to cap off like the plant THC? Don't do that. Come on, man, don't put potency limits. You just don't want any kind of adulterates or anything else other than THC in it, man. Come on, don't put limits on it. Mexico. All right, let's keep going. Low-income individuals, small farmers, and indigenous people would have licensing priorities. I like the sound of that, too. Especially the indigenous people part. Well, the poor individuals also, and the small farmers. All of that. That's all cool, man. I hope they should get priority. I hope that's the way it actually comes about, because they said something very similar to us here in California, and they lied. So I'm going to keep an eye on that one. It says strict restrictions would be imposed on cannabis packaging. That includes requiring nondescript, standardized containers that do not feature depictions of real or fictional people or testimonials. Marijuana can only be consumed in private spaces. Now, what exactly does that mean? That's pretty vague, private spaces. Just in your home? I mean, can you have a cannabis club and make it private? Like you charge a membership and people come in, bring their own weed, and they smoke it there? I wonder. What does that mean exactly? Only medical cannabis patients would be allowed to purchase infused edibles and beverages. Wow, really? Only patients? How long is that going to last? Come on. How long is that? I say that lasts maybe about 2 years before they change it to everybody can buy, infused edibles and drinks. Come on, only patients? That takes part of the fun out of it. It also says unregistered seeds and plants would be subject to forfeiture. What does that mean, unregistered? Does that mean everybody's going to be on some kind of registry? Am I registering as a grower? As a home grower? How does that work exactly? Unregistered. Many questions. Maybe a lot's lost in translation. Because this is translated from like a Spanish script. So maybe that's what it is. I hope so. And finally, no pesticides could be used on cannabis plants. Once again, need clarification. What do they mean by no pesticides? At all? Like even some that are seen as natural, like let's say some neem oil? What does that mean, no pesticides? Once again, gotta wait and see. But they're working on a list. It looks like by the end of the year that it's going to be legal federally, like, countrywide in all of Mexico. That's going to be great. All right. The other article I want to talk about, I got it off of Normal. That is normal.org. Go over there and get informed, become a member. And it's titled, Marijuana Arrest Rise for Third Year in a Row, Outpaced Arrests for All Violent Crimes. Wow. Starts off, the total number of persons arrested in the United States for violating marijuana laws rose for a third consecutive year, according to data released by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation. According to the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, police made 663,367 arrests for marijuana-related violations in 2018. That's more than 21% higher than the total number of persons arrested for violent crimes. Damn. Of those arrests for cannabis-related activities, some 90% were arrested for marijuana possession offenses only. So out of those more than 600,000 arrests, like 90% of them was just for possession. Goes on to say that police across America make marijuana-related arrests every 48 seconds. That's amazing, which it just trips me out. From what this article says, because it says a lot more than this. And once again, there's a link in the show notes so you can read the whole thing. But it seems like some of these states that still have cannabis prohibition, they see legalization coming. And it's almost like they want to arrest as many people as they can to get as many people in the system as they can, because they can turn it into some kind of revenue stream. Because you truly can, man, between like paying for court costs and drug tests and all this other nickel and dime stuff that the system does with you to really make it expensive. That's what it seems like they're trying to do. Like they're just trying to get as many people in the system as they can before it goes legal, and they can't arrest these people for these things. Or maybe they're trying to arrest them in large numbers just to make sure that when it does go legal, a lot less are able to get into the legal cannabis market. Because a lot of the laws, when they're written, they exclude people who have a cannabis crime on their record. You have to go through some hoops to get it expunged most times. I don't know, man. It just tripped me out when I read it. Especially nowadays, like I said, when a lot of states are just moving towards legalizing cannabis in some way or another. It just sucks, man. Every 48 seconds? That seems like a lot. As always, there's links in the show notes so you can read that article. And that, my friends, is the report from the Cannabis Front Line today. Now, as I said earlier, I had a conversation with Dr. Monica Vialpando, who has a PhD in pharmaceutical science. And we had an awesome, long, honest conversation about just vaping in general. Not just about cannabis, but nicotine also. Because I really wanted to understand what it's about. Because I don't vape. I'm not a vape cartridge kind of guy. I haven't in a long time. I have used them before in the past. But I don't know a lot of the science behind it. Not just that, but like I was saying, the nicotine products also. Because that is an issue as well. And the subject of vaping is a really broad subject, so we really didn't touch on some of the other things that people find important when we're talking about it, like teen use. We really didn't go into that. Hopefully we will some other time, because like I was saying, it is a huge subject and everybody's worried about this new kind of technology and a new kind of way that we're consuming cannabis and nicotine. And it was crazy because after our conversation, she left me with the opinion that we really don't know enough about like these products and these compounds and what they're doing to our lungs. And it sucks because I know it's really popular amongst a lot of people. But just because it's popular, that doesn't mean you and I, like the end user, we shouldn't have these honest conversations about what it really does and what the industry is, trying to push off on us. So I was super lucky to be able to talk to Dr. Vialpando, and she really did help put this a little more into focus for me. I'm not going to say it's totally sharp and I know what's going on, not at all. But, it helped. So hang tight, I'm going to play some music, and then I'm going to put that conversation on for you. Well, brothers and sisters, I'm really lucky to have with me today Dr. Monica Vialpando. Now, she has a PhD in pharmaceutical science, which means she's really no stranger to the inhalation science and product development. And that's because she's been working with pharmaceutical companies, nicotine companies, and most recently cannabis companies, both here in the U.S. and in the U.K. Dr. Vialpando, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much. And you nailed my last name right on the head. Normally people struggle with it.
You know what?
It's first try.
You know, I'm part Mexican. It's got to roll off somehow, right? So, you know, yeah.
Okay, that's where it's from. Got it. All right.
Yeah, there you go.
Sound like home.
So now, I met you at the CanMed event that happened last month in September. We were both there listening to Dr. Rafael Mashulo's presentation.
Yeah.
Which was really lucky for me because I've been looking for an authoritative voice just on the subject of vaping, because there's a lot of scary headlines right now about, you know, vaping in general. I mean, the CDC even went in front of Congress a couple of days ago and had to try to answer some questions. And a couple of people on that panel were trying to lay the blame squarely on legal cannabis products and the legal cannabis industry. But what seems to be the issue are the diluents or the dilutants or the things they use to thin out that oil. Is that right?
Well, it's a loaded question, and that's pretty much the basis for the rest of this talk, because it's not really one thing in particular. And with these headlines that I'm seeing, for example, a cannabis company will say, we're not using diacetyl or in our formulation, and these are sourced from reputable suppliers in China. And so, on one hand, these things are quite hurtful because they're saying we don't do this, but they don't really understand why they don't want to do it. So, in the case of diacetyl, I use as an example, that is a flavoring agent used for nicotine-containing vape pens. Now, this was found in some of the earlier formulations. It has a really nice custardy note, so it's in like these buttery flavors. But it also causes a thing called popcorn lung. And this is a great example of how there are things and chemicals that are completely suitable to ingest, but not inhale. And in this case, popcorn lung was discovered from workers at a popcorn factory. So they were just inhaling it. Now, if you think about taking it a step further with the mechanism of vaping, there's additional interactions with other chemicals, whether it be thinning agents or other flavoring agents, and then the heat mechanism. So if you can imagine, it's already a very complex process. So if we take it back and say, you know, someone who's in the legal THC market is going to blame the illegal THC market. The nicotine-containing vape companies have already been getting a lot of challenges from numerous groups, and so they also want absolutely nothing to do with this problem. So everyone's kind of pointing the finger at each other, and I really hope that the positive outcomes from these recent illnesses and deaths that are occurring is that these people will actually collaborate and work together, because there's a lot that we could learn from each other. Not so much the illegal part of it, but the legal THC containing market, as well as the e-cigarette market, and for examples of regulation. So if we go back to the case of diacetyl and popcorn lung, this ingredient is now no longer found in nicotine-containing vape pens in Europe because it's been regulated, and they need to know to demonstrate that is not in their product, as well as demonstrate everything that's in their formulations, in their process, and their hardware. This is an example where the legal cannabis-containing market can review and look at some of the testing that they're doing, such as emissions, some of the lessons learned, working with China. So it's pretty messy, and there are not many people who really know what's going on, because vaping in general is pretty new. Not, you know, if you think, well, it started about it was nicotine first, at least that we're aware of, and then it's progressed and it's evolved. And so from the nicotine containing side, they're getting safer and safer and safer. But going back to the point I wanted to make about the regulations, this diacetyl compound is still found in U.S. containing e-liquid formulations. So what I'm saying is that because there have been some smart regulations implemented more proactively rather than reactively, like we're seeing now in the U.S., it's facilitated a safer product, and that's what I'm hoping we can learn from in the cannabis space in order to do that and transition away. And so, even though it's a vape pen, whether it be nicotine containing or THC, they're very different. Even though they have similar mechanisms of how the hardware works, but there's modifications for each, of course. But the key differentiator is that cannabis-containing products do not like water in general. Unless you formulate it to be more water compatible, it won't mix with water. So as a result, these agents such as propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, or even diacetyl, these are not used in cannabis-containing products. So when I see companies say we don't use this, they're not thinking about the problem. They're just seeing, oh, we're not supposed to have this in our product or in our line, so we're just telling them we don't have it. But they're not looking to
now. Propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, PEG and VG, both of them at certain temperatures, at high temperatures, wind up turning into a form of formaldehyde, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So propylene glycol is more the culprit rather than VG in this one, and so it can absolutely, and that's a concern that we have with nicotine containing vape pens. But that's one of the things that you have to demonstrate or in your emissions testing when you're submitting this data is what's the formaldehyde formation. Now, one critical thing to think about when evaluating these studies is that you have to think of how high the temperature actually went, that hardware, how high it actually went to. So even though you can vape at, you can maximize the temperature, the voltage setting, the power, just to implement more heat. And then will drive the temperature up more, and the higher you drive the temperature up, the more likely you'll have this formaldehyde formation. Now, in most cases, and from what I've heard of vapors, a lot of these studies that they do, it doesn't taste good to take it up that high on these tests. So if you have independent researchers that are using smoke machines, they're taking up to max. And so it's kind of a way of like, even though your car can go 200 miles an hour, you're not driving at 200 miles an hour. And that's the thing, especially with the more on the nicotine containing side where you have more of a range of flavors, and some people like a lot of vegetable glycerin to create that big plume, those cloud chasers. Some people and that would have a low nicotine containing formulation, or other people who are wanting to use it to get alpha cigarettes would go use a different type of formulation. So it's a little bit more adjustable with nicotine containing products than with cannabis right now. I think for a number of reasons, just the technology has not caught up there. It just also hasn't been around long enough. But yeah, definitely that there are concerns with the lungs are super, super sensitive. So we have to be very, very mindful of every single component that we expose it to. And so while PG and VG are quite often used, like in Europe, we have to demonstrate that these certain acrolein levels, acetaldehyde, formaldehyde, that they're under a certain emissions test result concentration. So again, it's a pretty complex mechanism. Now, in the case of cannabis containing products, these are not typically used. I've seen them used, when I say these as in like PG and VG. I've seen them used more in the UK space, or in Europe in general, where they're formulating more with isolate. And the vaping just in general is more widely accepted in Europe than it is here in the United States. That's my general opinion. is what I've observed having worked in both industries. And so I think that people are a little bit more likely to adopt PG and VG with isolate. Now, I primarily work in California. I live in California, and we work and we prefer as whole plant as possible. And so that has some balances too that you'll have to consider with the other plant material. So again, it's always kind of a trade-off. But from like a efficacy therapeutic standpoint, and as well as just staying as simple as possible with these formulations, that's kind of how these things are
another
evaluated.
diluent or diluent that they use that I want to talk about is the medium chain triglycerides, or MCT. Now it's seen as a safer alternative, but I wouldn't really call it safe from what I've read, because also from what I understand, at certain temperatures or certain lengths of use, it can cause like a lipid pneumonia.
Yeah, that's been my biggest concern with cannabis-containing vape pens. You know, the industry wants to stay as all natural as possible. So medium chain triglyceride from coconut oil sounds a lot better than propylene glycol, and it's natural. So you would, most people would think, okay, this is a better
Well, yeah,
approach,
it sounds
thinning
sexier.
agent. And
it sounds sexier and more natural when it says, when you, like you said, throw in coconut oil. Wow, yeah, why not?
Of course.
I love the way it feels on my skin.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it goes back to the example where we started with the diacetyl. So what you eat doesn't mean you can inhale it, heat it up, vaporize it, inhale it. So there's a number of factors that play in the role, influence this. So, solubility is one of them. How well it will, dissolve in the lung fluids and transfer through the cell wall. But it's also size too, and as well as other considerations and other chemical compatibilities. For example, we're hearing vitamin E acetate as the main culprit, kind of the first chemical that people were pointing at causing lipid pneumonia. Now, that's a big water insoluble compound. The surfactants, so these are surfactants that is it's called surface active agents, and that helps solubilize and clear things, and just kind of helps clean up the lungs. Those then cannot clear such a compound as vitamin acetate. And then also when you're dealing with such compounds, you have little hairs in your lungs that will help clear up stuff. So they kind of goop down, and so they're also not functioning. So coming back to the MCT, it's not as worrisome as something like vitamin E acetate, but it is still very worrisome. And I'm actually more worried about this one than vitamin E acetate because of its wide use in the industry already. And it's something that will just slowly accumulate over time. And I think that, unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong, but I think that these are just the beginning of more reports to come as the market matures and as people decide to, be creative and try to differentiate their vape line, because there's so many vapes out there, and I've seen a lot of really crazy things suggested and put in these vape pens that just have me concerned. But really, it's the MCT, because I think it's a silent threat that people aren't listening to. And I've told a number of cannabis companies in the past about this, and essentially I'm telling them to reformulate their entire line, and I mentioned this to 3 companies, and none of them complied, and they decided to continue doing it despite my background, my health warnings, what I shared with them, and my multiple discussions with other scientists in this field too. And so it's just people in general won't do something unless they're told they absolutely have to do it. And unfortunately for these companies, they decided to risk the health of their consumer in order to save
so
money. So
that's where you think the disconnection lies is wow. Well, it sounds like, one, you're the only voice out there in the wilderness, yelling these things out. And two, you're also telling these companies to, like you said, reformulate. And do they really want to? Just cost effectiveness?
Yeah, well, I've heard a few other scientists say the same thing, especially around MCT. So I'm not alone in this one. But I think that that's what I say. I really hope that now people will listen, that this is a really important thing to evaluate and consider, and not, and I want everyone, regardless if you're a cannabis company, if you're a concerned mom of a teenager, or you've been using your vape pen forever, you're brand new. This applies to everybody. It is extremely complex to really understand and identify what is safe and what's not safe. And at where we are right now. And the only way that we can do that is through implementing organizations and regulations and educating these authoritative bodies about this. And, if you think about it's the compatibility between the liquid and the hardware. It's what you put in the liquid itself is what gets tested, which is exactly very, very different than what comes out and what's really important, which is what the user is exposed to. We're not testing for that. We're not testing what's happening, what chemical reactions are forming while you're using your vape pen, and then what gets exposed to your lungs, and then what comes out. And so we need to break down all of these individual steps to better identify what that culprit could be. On one hand, it could even be something as, a contaminated extract too. Because if you have say failed pesticide testing, or even say you tested the flower and it passed, then you did the extraction, you are concentrating that down. And so you might actually have high levels of pesticide testing that you didn't even notice. So that could be, a simple quality controls procedure that was put in place. What goes on during the heating and that formation, that involves a little bit more chemistry and some additional tools, like characterization tools, and knowledge. But again, these are things that we can adopt from other industries. We've been looking at inhalation products for a long, long time. It's just you have to modify it for the specific product on hand. And then the hardware. Yes, there's most of this hardware comes from the exact same place in China. I forget the quote, but I don't know exact the numbers, but it's about 6 out of 400 factories, like something insane. Only 6 out of 400 factories are ISO standard certified for vaping. And we partner with the group, the Blink group, and Arnaud Dumas-Surali, he's their CEO. He goes out there and he's inspecting and ensuring that if they give you a certificate of analysis for your hardware, that, a few batches down the road, that you're still getting the exact same type of materials and that nothing's been changed out, just kind of staying on top of those manufacturing things. And now he comes from the nicotine world. So again, this is applying that knowledge and making cannabis products. So
yeah, hardware is one of those questions that is suspect because, especially with cannabis oil, a lot of the terpenes, I believe, are like an alcohol based, and sometimes they'll start to degrade that hardware material. They'll taint the product. It'll just seep into whatever it is.
Yeah. Again, and also there's different levels of quality for sure with hardware. The sophistication and the safety with the hardware was slower to catch up than with nicotine because there was no way for them to test it and evaluate it. So just the kind of back and forth just slows down the overall innovation versus with nicotine, they could, that's legal. They could have tested that on site and there was more of a efficient, optimization process. But so when we first started out, they were basically looked like, more similar versions to nicotine containing electronic cigarettes. Like, for example, they had a cotton wick, which is what is used to draw up the liquid into the atomizer. Now, because the viscosity, so the flow of cannabis extract is so high, so it doesn't like the flow. It's very hard to wick. And so a cotton wick is not the most ideal approach. And so the industry has now shifted over to ceramic coils, which has better performance. So even something as simple as that, because you could have if you're working with a cotton wick, you could have some accumulation, burning effect. So that's one very simple parameter, one material type that makes a big difference. The other one is plastics too. You're heating and cooling and heating and cooling. As you had mentioned, you can have interactions with the material. So you can, we call these extractables and leachables. So plastics coming into the formulation going into plastics. So these are all things that we want to clearly avoid. And ways that we can reduce that is just using more high quality ingredients, glass material, and high quality metals. Of course, now we're luckily looking into heavy metals testing, but that was slower to come. And actually I think it was in the beginning of the year when they had found there was an independent study where they found tons of heavy metals in these legal vape pen markets. So that's when everyone starts, scrounging to make it better. But I'm saying we need to look at it now and make it right from the get-go as we're creating and this.
Yeah, like you were saying, evolving. At the beginning of the year when phase 3 testing here in California started for those heavy metals, a lot of these vape products were failing because of that interaction with the cartridge material.
It's that, and it's also how much of your formulation is in contact with the materials too, and how that's designed and how much airflow. So there's, again, even within the hardware part, there's a lot of safety considerations. But where I wish people would be looking at more, some companies are doing it, is evaluating the formulation, so the cannabis extract and the hardware compatibility, evaluating how well it wicks, what's coming out. There's a lot of interaction and assessment. So, for example, we worked on a project where we measured the viscosity of every single formulation that we made across how it changed across different temperature ranges. So we can have a better understanding how that material is going to behave as you're heating it up and you're going to try and draw it through that coil. So again, trying to avoid that burnt effect, accumulation, exposure. All of these things should be considered in evaluating not only the quality of the hardware components, but the performance between the two. So what could work for one extract may not be ideal.
I want to talk about, since a lot of these legal cannabis products don't use PG or VG, some of them use the MCT, others will use more terpenes in order to thin out that oil. Is that right?
Yeah, so terpenes are used for a number of reasons. I mean, we have terpenes in the plant, so it's part of us industry folks trying to capture the true plant experience. Terpenes will also help differentiate certain effects, whether you wanted a nighttime or a daytime. It's similar to what we experience if we're smoking flower. The result and how you feel can really vary depending on the strain. And really the strain more is referred to the terpene profile. So what terpenes are in there and what type of concentration. So the industry tries to, they draw in terpenes into the vape pen products. Now some are derived from cannabis, and some are created from food grade terpenes as well. And there's a number of companies that sell terpene blends made from food so that cannabis vape pen manufacturers can purchase this blend, and all they have to do is add it to their formulation, and they're good to go.
I'm sorry, so when you say food grade, those are just terpenes like phytocannabinoids made from other plants. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So you orange or lemon, mango, myrcene. Yeah, things like that. So, so that's possible as well. Now, terpenes will also help reduce the viscosity of the cannabis extract. So in a way, they can act like that propylene glycol, that MCT as well. And so, yeah, that's a great, another additional function for it. Now, where people should be careful is the amount of terpenes that you're putting in. So I would say if a cannabis company is purchasing their terpenes, like a terpene blend from food, they're going to be more likely to put in a higher concentration of terpenes. Because you'll get, it's a much cheaper material, to source than if it's cannabis derived, for one. So they're going to be a little bit more liberal in its use. They'll also have motivation to add more because that will further reduce the viscosity as well as, improve the taste profile and the effect of the formulation. But again, the emissions aren't being evaluated. And so there are studies coming out of academia that are showing volatile organic compounds, acetaldehydes formation, for example, carbonyls, from these terpenes as a result of the terpenes. These are really small molecules. And so the higher you stress them and heat them, they're going to degrade at maybe a lower temperature than a larger molecule might be. So we always have to be mindful of the concentration, because the higher you go, there's an exponential increase in these unwanted compounds that form as a result. In addition to that, terpene blends can be mixed with antioxidants like vitamin E to improve the stability of this blend. But that might not necessarily be communicated to the cannabis company who's purchasing it. And so it might be a company that says, we don't put any diluents or vitamin E in our product, but actually, in fact, they are. They're just not aware of it. So again, people aren't really going to open up the hood unless they're told they have to. And I hope now, especially there's some thinning agents. So companies that sell these terpene blends also sell viscosity reducing agents. But the ingredients aren't listed on there, which is insanely concerning. And from the company standpoint, they don't want to give away their proprietary formulation, but that has huge safety concerns, and that should absolutely never be allowed, especially
proprietary information is one thing, but I mean, a lot of that information has to do with public health issues, man. Yeah, I just don't get it.
Yeah, 100%.
So now I want to talk a little bit about the reaction of some of these states, and I'm asking you this because I know you helped kind of shape some of the e-cigarette regulations in the UK, and when we hear the stories about this lung disease, about vaping, what we never hear is the level of vaping that the person or the patient, the victim, had, whether they were vaping for a long time or they were these cloud chasers who like to these big clouds of smoke. They just say that vaping is wrong and they just want to ban it all. I mean, what do you think about states going around trying to ban vaping altogether?
It's excessive and over the top, and it's hurtful on a number of levels. On one hand, I get the reaction because there are a lot of people getting sick and there are people dying, and that's no joke. But if you also think about if we just work together to figure out what is going on, maybe tighten things up, maybe pull it off or temporarily off the shelves with certain, that's a state by state decision. But there's a lot of people that do benefit from vaping. And I think that in the case of nicotine, for adults who are using it as a tool to quit smoking, that's horrible. And I know that nicotine containing products, especially around Juul and the use of teens, like that has a whole other discussion that we can definitely go into. But when I'm talking specifically that, there are adults, it was created to help people quit smoking. And having been in the industry, I've heard so many success stories as a result of that. And again, it's us being straight out banning everything. It's being very reactive and not proactive. And we're hitting it with a blowtorch when we should have been using a lighter.
But what I really find interesting is the differences between this issue here in America and the same issue in the EU or the UK, because it doesn't exist there. And I think a lot of that has to do because of the way Europe decided to actually regulate these products. Because, as I understand it, I think, e-cigarettes, they have a limit of 20 milligrams per milliliter, Whereas here in America, some of these jewel pods, they can be as high as like 50, 59% or 59 milligrams per milliliter.
Yeah. Yes. I think, so when I was in the industry was around in the UK, 2014, 15, about 2 years over there, kind of when that was all going on. And then I moved over to the US, and I just couldn't believe how different the views of vaping, the differences between the two countries. For one, Public Health England had performed a very wide independent study just looking at all of the data on e-cigarettes in the EU that we had generated. And they determined that it was 95% safer than smoking. Now, we're never going to say it's safe, but it's within the parameters that we have set and what the data that they've seen. This is Public Health England has said this is e-cigarette products containing nicotine are 95% safer than cigarettes. So the approach has always been more as a smoking cessation method. At least in the EU when I was there. I mean, there was even talks about putting it in the national health system as well too. I'm a little bit disconnected from the nuances there, but then I come over here where it's like, it's big tobacco trying to get the kids and so I think even just the way it was approached so differently. Kids are going to do exactly the opposite of you tell them. So I think that because we were so gung-ho on protecting the kids, it actually made it more appealing to try it because there's something they shouldn't be doing. Now, I also agree that the way that these things are advertised and used, that I'm not saying that the e-cigarette companies are completely innocent here. I'm just saying kind of how the different approaches and the perspectives to the technologies have been across the two different countries. And so, the EU is a big ship to move, but so is the US. And the e-cigarettes came out in Europe around the same time they did in the States, and now they're way, 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 way safer abroad. Now we're getting to implement the PMTA here in the US. Was also issued, and there's different rollout periods. So they're getting there, but it in my opinion, having read both and worked in both industries, the U.S. just made it way overcomplicated and too extensive to the point that it delayed any kind of safety evaluations. And so still they're a lot healthier in Europe, and we're still putting diacetyl in our nicotine-containing products.
Yeah, it seemed like in Europe and in the UK, they focused more on actual harm reduction, whereas here in the US, it was more of an industry thing of just money. Yeah, go ahead and, create a new kind of cigarette. We don't really know what it's going to do or how it's, how it works, but yeah, go ahead, try it. It's just an odd, the difference is just really, when I read it, I was like, well, why didn't we do that here? And then, and the government seems like they're trying to shift blame from themselves because they're the regulating bodies. They're trying to shift blame from themselves to the industry. The industry doesn't give a shit about you. The industry, they'll try to sell you as much crap as they can sell you if the government's not there to tell them, hey, look, you can't do that. You're going to kill these people.
Well, like one example that I said we can learn from in Europe is the formation of these trade associations. For example, the British Standards Institute, they issued out a guidance for the industry to help manufacturers get ready for compliance. And they looked at things like hardware, your process, as well as the formulation itself. So they did break it down into different components because those three are very distinct into the quality of that product. And then France did the same thing. And then other countries followed suit. They kind of modified a little bit according to, it was the country's decision, but the Tobacco Products Directive had come out. That was for covering all of Europe. And then each country kind of, based on their interpretation of it, assigned a process. And that's something very simple that we could start working on together. And internally in my company, we've already started putting those guidances and for our clients in place just to evaluate like a risk-based assessment on your current process too. So that's one strategy that I think was very successful out of that we could definitely learn from.
Hey Doc, so
in the cannabis
quick
space.
question then. So if you yourself are developing a cartridge, I mean, how are you formulating it? How would you formulate it so, I don't know, it flows easier? And that's probably not even a simple question to ask.
No, it's a good question. Absolutely. So I prefer to use cannabis-derived terpenes. If I do, if say my client that I'm working with, they want food grade, then we really pay attention to like staying below a certain level of concentration. I've been very lucky to get or evaluate the different inhalation safety levels per terpene through my work and various clients too. And what I can tell you is that, let's say for myrcene, I can use up to, 0.3% concentration. But for humulene, it may be 0.5. So it's very much terpene dependent. If you're building it like that, and that will then trickle over across the blend. So I look from I look at the structure of the terpenes that are in there. Of course, the standard practices of evaluating the C of A's of the extract and make sure like my cannabis extract is clean and good. But anything else that I introduce, the terpenes, I then understand the concentrations, the effect that I want, combine the two, do assessments, viscosity testing, maybe some, see what comes out when we're reheating that, see what will form, at what temperatures do we want to stay below. And these are things that we learn to then make it compatible with the hardware. And a lot of times it's a lot easier to change the formulation component than the hardware. So usually I'm the one that's kind of having to tweak around, but at least before we even go into that stage, to have a good understanding of how our formulation performs. And so that's an initial strategy. And of course, the quality of the hardware. I would typically always prefer to work with the Blink Group for the hardware, because I know that Arno is over there in China quite frequently and ensuring the quality control practices. So that's a general kind of guidance on how we would go about doing.
So one of the things you're looking for, are you hoping
product.
that the terpenes that you're using, they kind of volatilize or heat up at more or less the same temperature? Because I know some of them you have to go higher and lower for others. I mean,
No, not at all. Otherwise, you don't get that nice flavor profile. You want to taste them all come off at different rates. What I'm saying more is you have to be mindful of how much of one you put in versus another. Like one terpene, you could put in a higher concentration than another from an inhalation safety standpoint.
Hey Doc, so I don't know how often you buy a vape pen or a vape cartridge, and I don't want you to name any products, but what do you look for when you're buying them?
I don't, because of all of the
It's kind of like,
I've
how
seen.
the sausage is made or what? I don't want that.
I really don't. Yeah. I will do edibles. I will do, my first flowers, topicals, vape pens. Unless I have worked with the company and I've seen what they do, and I won't use them. And I've just seen too much, and that's kind of the spot I'm in. But there are very good companies out there. Full disclosure, I'm a scientific advisor to GoFire, and they have a vaping device. But it's a lot more than that. It's actually more of a data collection device. It helps the user fine tune their experience and share it with others. But part of the reason I said, yes, I will stand behind this company is because it's taken them years and years to assemble it, because they're making a quality product from medical grade components, true medical grade device. And so it's companies that I will definitely stand behind and push for, because they're trying to make it more innovative and safer and more and medically focused. And so there's also a doctor or patient platform. And I encourage you all to go to growfire.co if you want to learn more about that. But other companies that would say highlight and show that it's a true formulation and device compatibility, ask for things like, how are your terpenes derived? What if they're, what are their concentrations? Do you have any sense of that? And if chances are maybe the brand ambassador is not going to know the concentration of terpenes in the vape pen, but I encourage you to leave your card, have that scientist, that developer get back to you. Because if they don't know, they're going to be thinking, oh, wait, why is this person asking? Why is it important? So it'll just once people start asking more questions, then we'll start
once people start
answers
asking more, then
things.
they have to, they see the benefit of just having that information out there, just a more educated public, hopefully. Well, hey, Dr. Monica Vialpando, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me, and I appreciate it. Is there...
No,
I've been hearing
pleasure.
a lot of questions,
question.
a lot of crazy, just knee-jerk fears about these things, man. So, again, thank you for taking the time. Can you... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go for it. My pleasure.
So, do you want to tell everybody where they can find you or your company?
Good question. It's always kind of where's Waldo. So I started my company in San Francisco. And so we have our lab facilities here in Oakland, a number of scientists here in the Bay Area, but we have scientists globally because we work on a global scale. So, I tend to be flying all over the place. That's why it's the, Where's Waldo? And it's a mixture between education. So I teach at Loyalist College, a cannabis formulation course. That'll take up a big chunk of time early next year, or it's conferences, or it's going to clients and maybe sourcing equipment. So I'm on the road a lot. And as a result, I can work and meet with clients, globally. And we also have, scientific support, spread throughout as well. But our headquarters
Well,
are
thanks
here
again,
in the Bay
Doc, for
Area.
taking the time. Do me a favor, don't hang up. Everybody else, I'm gonna play some music,
Okay.
and then I'll be back in a bit. So that, my friends, was Dr. Monica Vialpando. Like I said before, after talking to her, it didn't leave me with a whole lot of confidence, not just about like the safety of vaping products, but also like the kind of things vaping producers and even to some extent what dispensaries are telling people about how safe these products are. And either it's because, like she was saying, the brand ambassadors don't have that information, or the bud tenders don't have that information. So once again, that just goes to show you that we all have to be kind of our own advocates about the things we, buy and put into our own bodies. I mean, yeah, they may taste great, or they may be, real convenient. Like I said, I've used them in the past myself, but I don't think from here going forward I'm going to be using them. Now, if you want more information about what Dr. Vialpando does, you can look up her company, which is Vialpando LLC. That is Vialpando. Again, want to thank her for taking the time. She's super busy. I appreciate her talking on the phone with me. As always, if you have a question or a comment about this episode, you can send an email to inmygrow@gmail.com or find us on Instagram at inmygrow. You can also find us on Cannabis at just Alex Robles. Well, mi gente, my people, once again, that is the end of my notes, which means it's the end of the show. As always, if you found this episode educational, entertaining, or if it even gave you a little escape from your day, go over to patreon.com/inmygrow and make a financial donation. Now, those funds simply help me pay for different hosting fees and pay for equipment and just make it easier to keep the show going. If you don't want to leave a donation over at Patreon, no problem. Go over to inmygrow.com click on the Support the Show tab and you can order a t-shirt. And yet another way, before you go shopping on Amazon, click on the Amazon link at the top of the show notes, because that just lets them know that we sent you and the show gets a commission. Now, if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. I get it. Here's how you can help. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Subscribe to the website, inmygrow.com. Then go over to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel, In My Grow. And after you've done all that subscribing, go ahead and tell 3 other people about the show. Real simple, real easy. Once again, I want to thank all the artists who let me use their music to put the show together. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you very much. Alright, so yeah, I'm going to get up out of here. You know I love you all very much. And remember to always grow, learn, and teach.